More and more people are seeking alternative ways of maintaining their health, wellness, and vitality. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week we're going to explore traditional Chinese medicine with Nina Cheng. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, it is the interview portion of our show. My special guest today is a new guest. We're going to talk about traditional Chinese medicine with Nina Cheng. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Founder of the Eastern Philosophy Chinese Medicine Company, accompanied by a team of renowned practitioners and scholars of Chinese medicine, sharing practical, accessible remedies and protocols that you can use to improve your mental and emotional well-being. Supported by historical primary sources and modern clinical research, Nina's book, which I'm going to hold up here, is called Chinese Medicine for the Mind, a science-backed guide to improving mental health with traditional Chinese medicine. It's a beautiful book. I was reading it last night. I really enjoy it, and it's got so many practices that you can do on your own. Each chapter covers a common mental health condition, whether it be anxiety, depression, insomnia, ADHD, brain fog, etc. And there's a lot of information that's readily available for you. Herbal formulas, how to do some self-massage and acupressure, Qigong protocols, meditation, visualization, exercises, 5-element music therapy, and more. Nina was born in China, raised in the US, and is doing such great work because I think it's so important at people that we learn more about different modalities and work on prevention. The best way to stay healthy is take care of yourself. You know, when you go and you see the doctor, they're going to help you out, but they want you to take care of yourself, and that responsibility lies with you. And one of the great bases of information for self-preservation, if you will, and longevity is traditional Chinese medicine. And I don't think many Americans know much about it. So we're going to get into that right now with my special guest, Nina Cheng. Welcome to Guys Radio.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Well, let's start from the beginning. I guess folks out there, they're going to want to know a little bit about yourself and what was your journey leading you up to putting this book together, because it's a beautiful book. I'm going to hold it up again for those who are watching. It's got gorgeous illustrations. It's chock full of information, and it's got a lot of remedies, preventative, and ways to take care of yourself if you come down with something. But it's all about longevity and well-being.
Yeah, that's right. So this book, I guess, has been underway for a couple years now. I was approached by a publisher 2 years ago to write something about mental health in Chinese medicine. But I guess my own journey with Chinese medicine goes back far before that. I started the Eastern Philosophy in 2019, and it's been kind of an idea in the back of my mind since college that I wanted to just do something in this space, but I never really thought Americans were ready for it or that interested in it until very recently. And, I've just had so many successes personally with treating chronic conditions through Chinese medicine where there weren't really good or adequate treatments in Western medicine. And, I really didn't feel like there were companies in the US that were doing this the right way, presenting Chinese medicine authentically, but also with, supporting evidence, whether that be scientific data or like historical primary sources that gave people a sense of confidence in its, thousands of years of tradition and experience, or in the many thousands of new studies being done today to validate, various treatments. So essentially, the Eastern Philosophy was a culmination of that, or what I hoped to be a culmination of that. And then the book kind of built upon, all of these values that I had created for the company.
It's really interesting because people, we in the West, we use mostly allopathic medicine. And we look at some other modalities and we call it alternative health. And really, the alternative health, including traditional Chinese medicine, far supersedes the allopathic medicine that we practice today. And again, a lot of it is about prevention. I know, having lived in New York for many years, going to Chinatown and going into some of the shops and seeing all these herbs and the mixtures they make up. And you can't just do this on your own. It's a science and it is an art, and you have to work with the right practitioner. But just in general, a general sense, Nina, how would you, for our audience, kind of define what is Chinese traditional Chinese medicine, and what is it really all about?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a big question because I think traditional Chinese medicine in the West, we might commonly think of it as, acupuncture or herbal medicine, but really it's kind of a lifestyle for millions of, Chinese people or the Chinese diaspora around the world because everything from daily food to the music that they're listening to or the exercises that they're doing can kind of be considered Chinese medicine. We touch upon this a bit in the book. Food therapy. If you think about the way that Western diet tends to work, or like the common eating habits that we have here in the U.S., everyone orders a plate, and you might share some small plates, but pretty much you have your entree and you eat it, and that's it. But even in Chinese cuisine, the way that it's traditionally served, it's family style, so you're eating a little bit of everything. Everyone is sharing several big plates, and even that alone is built off of Chinese medicine principles in that you're diversifying your food as much as possible. You're improving your gut microbiome. So, even little details like that, I think, reflect the philosophy behind Chinese medicine. But yeah, I mean, it's everything. There's just so many therapeutic modalities within it. It can pretty much be considered, just everyday life.
Mhm.
But commonly, I think what we would, see here in the West would be acupuncture, herbal medicine, maybe like qigong, as you're familiar with.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just trying to kind of
Okay.
introduce more Chinese medicine concepts.
For our listeners who may not know the difference, what is the difference between Qigong and Tai Chi?
So they, yeah, that is a good question. They're both fairly modern concepts. Um, they all types of movements that date back to, I think, the first uh, like evidence we have of it was from the Mawangdui excavation, but essentially the precursor is called Daoyin, which is a stretching and pulling exercise. But I think really like Tai Chi, the only real difference is that Tai Chi is considered a more martial art, so you can battle people using
Mhm.
Tai Chi
Yeah.
movements, and Qigong lacks the more martial aspect. But essentially, many of the movements are quite similar. It's
Mhm.
just that one is, intended for a
Mhm.
different purpose.
It seems
Yeah, but
like
they both
Nina.
are moving.
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
No, no, no,
Sorry.
no. I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, both are essentially, manipulating the movement of qi in your body. I
Mhm.
think is the
And
ultimate purpose.
it seems like in the Qi, another perfect term for us to talk about. What exactly is Qi for our listeners out there who aren't that familiar? To me, I take it as like you energy, but I'm sure that's just a shorthand for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hear of qi being equivalent to energy, but from a like a historical text basis, I guess a more accurate definition would be vital life force. So it you can think of it as just your life force
Mhm.
essentially like
Mhm.
coursing through your
Mhm.
body. It's not necessarily the same thing as just energy, as in the opposite of fatigue or the opposite of being tired. It's life essentially,
Okay.
and it's a more metaphorical term, I would say. But some people who are, let's say, qigong practitioners, they can literally feel qi moving through their body, and sometimes they say they can feel like certain limbs getting warmer or certain parts of their body feeling different or warmer as it's moving through. But I think those are kind of advanced concepts. Most people can just think of it as
Mhm.
life force.
It seems like with when I'm doing my exercise and stuff, a lot of it feels like I'm opening up, whether it's for lymphatic drainage
Right.
or for the heart, for different organs. And it seems like there's five main organs, and they're defined a little bit differently in traditional Chinese medicine. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and the importance of these five organs?
Yes, I think this is probably the part that is most confusing for people who are new to Chinese medicine because they'll hear terms like, oh, liver qi stagnation, which is a really common,
Mm-hmm.
pattern that many people are afflicted with, especially living in cities. It might be like you might have symptoms like irritability or, mild anxiety. Um, but they hear that and they just assume, oh, something's wrong with my liver. I got to get tested. But it's not one-to-one equivalent. Liver or, any other organ. Typically, these terms are used in Chinese medicine to denote organ systems, not organs.
Mm-hmm.
So, there might be a little overlap, but it's not a one-to-one equivalent. So you might hear, like spleen qi deficiency, for example, and that's not to say there's something wrong with your spleen, but essentially that's a way that Chinese medicine maps different conditions or different patterns. So you don't have to worry too much essentially about your specific organ having issues. It's just a way that it's a minor difference between Chinese medicine and Western medicine in terms of how different diseases are categorized or different conditions are categorized.
Now, this book, this wonderful book, Chinese Medicine for the Mind, a science-backed guide to improving mental health. Why did you choose, Nina, mental health as the focus of this book?
Yeah, well, I think it's very, unfortunately, terribly understood in terms of Chinese medicine because a lot of people think that TCM, as we call it, shorthand, is mostly for, let's say, acupuncture is for treating pain, or that Chinese medicine can't treat mental health symptoms. This is a pretty prevalent, uh, what you call it, bias, I guess, even in China. It's just I don't know how this arose, but contrary to that, actually, the most popular herbal formula in Chinese medicine is one that affects mental health. Um, it's for liver qi stagnation, which is something that I had mentioned earlier. But yeah, it's just a topic that isn't explored very often. There's actually no books written on Chinese medicine psychology for a lay audience. There's, I think, from all my research, there's really only one textbook in the English language on this topic. So I
Until
think
now. Until now.
until now, yeah, Chinese medicine has so much to offer people who have, mental health conditions, especially maybe more mental health conditions that aren't extremely severe. So, obviously there are treatments in Chinese medicine for like bipolar or schizophrenia, but there's very successful and clinically validated treatments in Chinese medicine for things that are a bit lower on the
Mhm.
severity or acuity scale in, depression, anxiety, what have you.
Okay. Now, traditional Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years, and there's been a lot of testing on it. It's
Mhm.
tested a little bit differently than we do the testing of pharmaceuticals here, but there has been testing on it. Here's a kind of a two-part question for you, Nina. One is, do most people in China uh, participate in traditional Chinese medicine, or like so many other things, have they taken on some of the Western bad habits, if you will, where, like the diet, like the fast food and stuff like that? Is that also happened with the medicine area, or is this tradition been preserved? And secondly, has the traditional Chinese medicine evolved over time?
Okay, so actually, I think there are 3 points that I would like to.
Okay, sorry.
The first would be that you said it has been tested, but differently than Western medicine. So, yes and no. So now there are actually many, 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 thousands of randomized controlled trials
Okay.
for traditional Chinese medicine, mostly in the herbal medicine space. And some of these I've even discussed in the book, and, they're cited as well, but some of them have even outperformed Western treatments. So yes and no. I would say the no part in terms of it being tested differently is that, historically, even going back to the Song Dynasty, let's say around year 1000 AD, there has been empirically verified treatments in Chinese medicine. So you can see in some of those historical texts where they say like this has been verified and has been proven successful and where they say this has not been proven successful. So Chinese medicine has a pretty long history of, independent and intentional validation of its methods. So I think that's a bit of a, something that people just assume, like a wrong assumption, essentially, that Chinese medicine isn't, clinically backed or it hasn't
Mhm.
been verified in some way. Um, but yeah, just to get that out of the way. So
That's good.
going to your question about people in China and how they
Yes.
practice Chinese medicine, or whether or not they practice
Mhm.
Chinese medicine versus Western medicine. So a lot of people don't see them as exclusive. And if you go into Chinese hospitals, often there's a Western medicine wing or, section, and then there's a Chinese medicine wing. And sometimes you can go to the both of these wings in one visit, for example. And that is also the case in a few Western hospitals, but only in the oncology departments for the most part. And they call that integrative medicine.
Okay.
But in China, it's more like complementary, I
Mhm.
guess. And it's still extremely popular. I think more than 50% of people in China have used or continue to use some aspect of Chinese medicine in their daily lives.
Okay.
So it's definitely not one or the other for the majority of people. It's sort of seen as maybe Chinese medicine is something they use for more chronic conditions, and Western medicine is something they use for more like acute situations. But yeah, there's not like a dichotomy
Mhm. Now,
necessarily.
the third part of the question, and forgive me for bundling them, but has Chinese traditional Chinese medicine, has it evolved over the centuries, or is it basically the same?
It's definitely okay. Well, some of it is the same, but it's definitely also evolved. I think what surprises people is that many, maybe the majority of treatments are exactly as they were, dating back thousands of years. Even on my website, you'll see us
Mhm.
writing in the product description, this is the first instance, 1093, it was seen in this book, and this formula was originally, a formula for hyperactivity in children, for example. So you'll see a long lineage or a long tradition of certain herbal medicine formulas. So essentially, that's a recipe, um, and they date back, 1,000 years or more. But Chinese medicine has definitely evolved because little known fact, I guess, for the majority of people, in 1929, it was almost abolished in China because it was seen as representing old China and like a hindrance to China's modernizing ambitions. So in 1929, there was a big move to ban Chinese medicine, but essentially people protested and practitioners protested, and the effort was thwarted. But in that effort, the practitioners and the pharmacists and all the people who were behind the scenes, they decided that they needed to essentially self um, revolutionize. So they completely changed the way that Chinese medicine was practiced. And essentially, since then, they've stripped away any sort of like spiritual practice within Chinese medicine in China. And they clinicalized, or essentially they moved it in a much more Western biomedical direction.
Mhm.
So now there's so many studies being done on Chinese medicine because of their efforts going back almost 100 years. So now it's kind of almost a hybrid of Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, but we call it
Fascinating.
traditional Chinese medicine.
Okay. My special guest on Guys Radio, Nina Cheng, founder of the Eastern Philosophy and the author and compiler of the Chinese Medicine for the Mind book, A Science-Backed Guide to Improving Mental Health with Traditional Chinese Medicine. We should talk about some of the mental health issues because they're so prevalent today, whether it be in China or in the US. There's emotion is usually at the heart of a lot of mental health. And in traditional Chinese medicine, as articulated very nicely on page 26, it's all about the emotions. So, and the five phases. Could you kind of explain what the five phases means and what the importance of emotion when it comes to mental health?
Yeah, so the five phases, or you might hear them referred to as the five elements, this is a concept that we might think we're unfamiliar with, but actually it's pretty much existing in every culture, including old Western medicine. It dates back to ancient Greek medicine as well. The only difference with Chinese medicine is that the five phases or five elements are dynamic. So in other cultures like ancient Greek medicine or Ayurveda, they're actually static, like air, fire, what have you. But in Chinese medicine, even though, they sound like they might be static, wind, metal, what have you, they're actually representing a movement towards something else. So metal, for example, it's a little bit confusing because they all also have a corresponding organ as well as corresponding, colors and conditions and emotions. But metal is connected to the lung, and that represents grief and also letting go of emotions. But it's basically it. I think this is also a concept that's difficult for people to grasp. It's basically a concept that exists in Chinese medicine philosophy, also, politics. It's kind of used to denote many, many different things in Chinese culture. And I like to point to a tweet that went viral a few years back where someone, I can't remember her handle, but she tweeted that she goes, I don't know how to explain this, but Thursday, 8 p.m., and October are all the same. And you might not know how to explain that in Western culture, but in Chinese culture, that would be considered the metal element. It's basically, like you're 80% of the way and, you're letting go, but you're also looking for the renewal. So I think that's a cool concept because it extends, into so many different arenas. And then the second part of your question was what again? Could you repeat that?
The five phases we've got, and they're all based on, in terms of treating mental health, the five phases are to improve your mental health. So you've got the liver, you've got the heart, you've got the spleen, the lung and the kidney. And I guess just moving forward, like anger is usually considered that it's connected to the liver, and fear to the kidneys. And so if somebody maybe has kidney cancer, they might have had repressed fear. And if they're very angry, they could have liver issues. Is that kind of directionally accurate? Or is this
Not
systematic?
Yeah, I would say it's more of a, organ system connotation in terms of, anger being associated with the liver, for example. That's extremely common, by the way. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily tie that in with actual issues, like physical issues with the organ itself. It's more of an energy or like a resonance, I guess you could say. But yeah, they're not equivalent to the actual organ.
Well, let's do this, Nina. Let's for those who are not too familiar with traditional Chinese medicine, if a Westerner went in to see a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, how would they be kind of observed, and then how would they treat something like depression?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you go to a practitioner, usually they'll use three different diagnostic methods. So one would be looking at your pulse or, evaluating your pulse. So this is called pulse diagnosis. They basically get a sense of how your body is functioning. And that's not just, a way to measure your pulse, but they can or they should be trained to diagnose certain conditions. And personally, I've done this with. Years ago, I went to a prominent Chinese medicine practitioner in Beijing. He did the pulse reading, and he said, "Oh, there's a problem with like this very specific ventricle of your heart." And he kind of said it in passing. It wasn't like a huge issue. But years later, after I had to I had a Holter monitor strapped onto my heart, and that was proven to be like exactly what he said. So yeah, there are instances where you're just amazed by their abilities. But that's one thing that they're doing. The next would be perhaps tongue diagnosis. So, you stick out your tongue and they look for certain color variations, or, they can see like scalloped edges. These all have different meanings, and it helps enforce or reinforce diagnosis for them. And then the last thing would be they ask you a series of questions. So it's to determine your symptoms, and that helps them kind of put you into a pattern of what they think you might have. And then the way that they're treating you, I mean, in the West, especially in the US, acupuncture is really popular. So the majority of practitioners are trained mostly in acupuncture. I read a statistic that only about 5% of practitioners in the US receive herbal medicine training. So that's pretty unusual because in China, the vast majority of people receive herbal medicine training, and acupuncturists are more in the minority. So here, I guess you would probably mostly be receiving acupuncture, but you might also be receiving herbal medicine. And in China, for sure, herbal medicine would probably be the more popular treatment.
So let's talk about acupuncture for a moment here. Two questions. One is, I've read, and I don't know if it's true or not, so I throw it to you, is that, anytime you puncture the skin, it's not a healthy thing to do for your health. And acupuncture is all about obviously using needles to hit certain points to help alleviate some type of systematic trauma or whatever. Have you ever heard that before?
I've never heard that, but I don't know if acupuncture would really fall into that, because the punctures are so minor.
Okay.
They're basically not even there. But what acupuncture is intending to do is to essentially relieve the stagnation in a certain area or along a certain channel. So maybe overdoing it is not great.
Okay.
And I think in a lot of acupuncture schools, they would encourage people to use the minimum number of needles to treat a disease or to treat a condition. But I think if you look at a lot of clinical studies, overwhelmingly it's positive for your health, or positive for your well-being.
So we touched on depression earlier. So let's say you've gone into you're getting your diagnosis or prognosis, and it's you have depression. What would be, and I'm generalizing, of course, what might be a typical kind of procedure to follow for that? What would you get? What would be the treatment for that?
So unlike in allopathic medicine, there isn't really a diagnosis in Chinese medicine that just says depression.
Okay.
And I think this is something that's unique and probably one of the more positive aspects of Chinese medicine in this regard, because these diagnoses in Western medicine are often quite stigmatizing, and people feel so horrible about the diagnosis because they think it might be chronic, or it pretty much is a chronic diagnosis, that there's often poor compliance in terms of actually taking the medication, or following the instructions. So in Chinese medicine, you would never receive the diagnosis, oh, you have depression. They would say that you have XYZ pattern, and in the book, we go through all the different patterns that would fall under each condition, each Western medical condition. But these patterns are really like temporary issues. Often you'll see, something deficiency, or something excess. So essentially what Chinese medicine is trying to do is to get your body back into equilibrium, so that, you might have these temporary fluctuations that are causing certain symptoms, but they're not chronic, and they're not necessarily only mental either. So I know we're talking about depression, but one good way to illustrate this that I often use is in terms of anxiety. So we'll just skip over to anxiety for 1 second, if you don't mind. So often, in Western medicine, if you have anxiety, you would associate that with pretty much just the psychological symptoms. But in Chinese medicine, they would equally look at the physical symptoms that you have. So you might have one type of anxiety, you might have like really rapid breathing. Another type, you might have poor digestion, like some people have diarrhea if they have an anxiety attack.
Mhm.
So these are equally weighted as well as, the psychological feeling of anxiety. So when people are diagnosing, when practitioners are diagnosing you, they look at the overall pattern and all the physical and mental symptoms that go into what might, count as anxiety or depression in a Western sense. And then they, give you the treatment, the herbal medicine treatment or the, acupuncture treatment or what have
Mhm.
you, to treat the pattern. So you might, have, let's say, a type of depression or anxiety that comes with insomnia and fatigue. And you might find that that's also related to, let's say, having heavy bleeding, for menstrual periods. So all these things might be connected, but I think it's rarely connected in the Western sense. But they are seeing more and more studies that connect these things the way that
Okay.
Chinese medicine has connected them.
How about insomnia? I know it was listed on the some of the maladies there, and there's so many people who have insomnia. Is it a one size fits all, or are there multiple reasons and multiple forms of insomnia? And is there one remedy, if you will?
Yeah, so this is something that has affected me my entire life pretty much. I was always the kid in kindergarten class, the one kid in my class who couldn't fall asleep during nap time.
Oh,
Um,
could not.
could not fall
Oh,
asleep.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But, like all the other conditions, it's definitely not one size fits all. And, in Western medicine, if you get a prescription for sleep medication, that's usually something that is
Right.
sedating.
Hmm.
That's not the case in Chinese medicine. There are herbs that are sedative herbs, but for the most part, what Chinese medicine treatments try to do for insomnia is to bring your body back into equilibrium. So sometimes they might be, like tonifying your body, essentially fortifying it because your body is weak. But yeah, the goal is essentially to get your circadian rhythm back into sync. So oftentimes you'll take Chinese medicine herbs and you're like, oh, why do I not feel groggy? But just remember that that's not the main
So,
intended goal.
so could this be, for instance, for insomnia as an example, could your what you're prescribed be a combination of the herbal, maybe the foods you eat, and also your movement and breathing? So it's a
For sure.
combination. It's not just here's a pill.
For sure. And, other things have been shown to be very effective for insomnia, like hot foot baths, for example. There's also a lot of studies supporting that, or reflexology. Um, I mean, there's so many different modalities that I think can be effective more than just taking
Hmm.
herbal medicine supplements or pills. But if anyone has gotten a massage, I think they can attest to the fact that sometimes you can get very, very sleepy from that. So yeah, like reflexology, which is foot massages, are really popular in China, especially late at night. People tend to go right before going to bed,
Really?
and then they often fall asleep in the chair. But yeah, in the book we also go through some of these other treatments besides just herbal medicine.
Mhm. It's so fascinating. With traditional Chinese medicine, is the focus on uh, prevention, symptom treatment, and curing, or a combination of all three?
Right. Yep. Yeah, there's a very famous quote in the oldest book in Chinese medicine, which can be summarized as saying, the mediocre doctor treats disease, and the top doctor prevents disease from even arising. So you're really hoping not to be at the point where you have to treat the disease. Essentially, preventative health is a very heavy focus, probably more so than treatment. But that's not to say that once you actually do have the disease or the condition, that it can't be treated. It's just that lifestyle is so heavily emphasized. A healthy lifestyle is so heavily emphasized in
So,
Chinese
so
culture.
theoretically, then, if somebody is prescribed some lifestyle changes, some herbal remedies, by engaging with them, you could theoretically be cured because you're not participating in the same behaviors that gave you the symptoms and the condition you have?
Yeah, you hear about experiences like that a lot. Often it's through diet modifications,
Mhm.
which, this is something that I think a lot of people recognize as a weakness in the Western medical system is that diet is not really heavily emphasized.
Right.
And, even at medical school, it's not really taught at all to aspiring physicians. But oftentimes, if you go to a practitioner, they'll say, "Oh, like, what are you eating? I'm seeing these symptoms. Are you eating a lot of like cold foods,
Mhm.
like salads, smoothies, things like that?" And unfortunately, I think a healthy diet in the Western sense would be seen as, "Oh, I'm eating a raw salad and I'm having a smoothie, and that's
Right,
my
right.
lunch or that's my breakfast." But in Chinese medicine, if you have especially like weak digestion or, like cold hands and feet or a sore lower back, those are often tied to eating overly cold foods. And cold doesn't just necessarily mean cold temperature, but cold and raw kind of are
Mhm.
linked. So those are not great for your digestive system. Basically, your digestive system has to work overtime. So you might have someone tell you that a practitioner tell you that you should probably be eating more cooked foods and warmer temperature as well. And oftentimes people will see a huge difference just
Mhm.
with that simple modification.
How about in terms of foods that could lead to some of the conditions, the mental conditions we're talking about, and physical conditions also, like meat, where some people now, as you know, in the States, there's meat eaters and there's other people who are like no meat. And then also you've got people who drink alcohol. Now more and more people are not drinking alcohol anymore.
Right.
What-
Yeah. Well, unlike what people might expect, actually, meat is pretty heavily emphasized in
okay.
traditional Chinese medicine, and it's considered quite nourishing and something that a lot of bodies need, essentially. Obviously, people can overdo it, and I think the number one tenet or takeaway is that you should be diversifying your diet as much as possible. Like, don't eat too much of one thing. Keto diet, not a good idea.
Right.
But essentially, have a balanced diet that consists both of meat and vegetables and, try to eat more cooked foods. Um,
Alcohol?
and alcohol, so some alcohol is used medicinally in Chinese medicine. So you'll see, like liniments, for example. Sometimes you'll see tonifying herbs being put into alcohol. But yeah, I think overall, less is probably
Right.
better. You shouldn't really overconsume, and there are certain conditions that are linked to the overconsumption of alcohol or of let's say like excess drugs, um, or just
Mhm.
overwork and tiring
Yeah.
yourself out. But essentially, it's seen as a stressor on the body.
So overall, with traditional Chinese medicine, for our listeners out there, what are some of the things that they can do on their own in terms of what they can eat, what type of supplements they can take, uh, and what they can do lifestyle-wise to live their best lives, as well as they should see a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner when they can. But it just in the meantime, on a day-to-day basis, what are some of the things people can do, and what are some of the supplements, the natural supplements that they can take? Everybody talks about ginger. Raw ginger is really good for you, and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, so ginger is definitely beneficial, but some people who run too hot might find it a little bit overstimulating. So if you're one of those people, it might not be the best product for you. But otherwise, I think it's a great, um, supplement or a great food. Um, Actually, the first product that I sold on my site was a homemade ginger tea paste,
Okay.
and it has other, beneficial ingredients as well. But I'm a big proponent of ginger myself. I think tea is also
Mhm.
very beneficial. The tea that I tend to recommend is called pu'er tea. It's not that well known in the US, but it is a fermented tea from
Ah.
Yunnan, which is a southwest
Mhm.
region in China near where I just was last month. But it's kind of it's bordering Myanmar and Thailand and what's the other country? Um, Cambodia, I guess it's in
Okay.
that region.
Mhm.
So it's very, very south, very, very west. But it's, yeah, fully fermented. It has a lot of great benefits for
Okay.
gut microbiome.
Okay.
And I think it tastes great as well. And then 5-element music. So music therapy, I think, is something that everyone can also benefit
Is
from.
that based on
Um,
frequency, Nina? Is it different types
it's
of
not based on
frequencies? Okay.
frequency. It's not based on frequency. It's based on the scale that it's in. So
Okay.
it's sort of based on the pentatonic scale, but
Mhm.
also it's using traditional Chinese instruments, and it tends to be more simple melodies. We have a free playlist on Spotify.
Oh,
We
what's it
mentioned in
called?
the
I
book
want to
as
get it.
well.
Yeah. Okay.
Called I think it's 5-element music, and it's all one word.
Okay. Okay. And it's in
But
the
if you look
book.
in the music therapy, yeah, if you look in the music therapy sections, we do mention it in the book. Um, but that's something that's free that anyone can do. You can
Great.
find these songs on
Okay.
YouTube as well, and we have the protocols listed in the book.
Awesome. Well, listen, you've done a spectacular job with this. It is a beautiful book, and there's a lot of illustrations, there's a lot of charts, there's a lot of easy to grasp information. And by easy, I don't mean it's not important. It's just delivered with clarity. So great job here, you and your collaborators. Tell us a little bit, Nina, where they can find our audience can find more about you and your book and traditional Chinese medicine.
Yep. So we have an Instagram and TikTok where we post a lot of content. So you can find us there. It's called The Eastern Philosophy. We also have a website, which is just theeasternphilosophy.com. We also sell the book there, but the book is also available at a lot of bookshops across the US. It is on Amazon as well, though I know a lot of people aren't trying to buy from Amazon these days. And I think there's some Canadian retailers also. And it's currently being translated, or is already translated, in Hungarian, Polish, Chinese, and Estonian. So we're working on some other foreign translations as well. So
Fantastic. Nina
yeah,
Cheng, and you have a website, it's easternphilosophy.com?
that's right. Yep.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much for being on Guys Radio. Listen, I hope we can do it again because we haven't even scratched the surface into what's in it entails in this book. It's really fantastic. And I just want to give kind of an overview for our audience just to get them familiar and open to some new ideas about how to take care of yourself and how to live a long, very vital life. So thank you so much, Nina Cheng, for being on Guys Radio. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys TV and Guys Radio, please support us by subscribing to our channels and platforms. Thank you.